This is George John Pantos, born 1930 and counting. Dad's life story by his four daughters. Interview by Lauren Murphy on September the 5th, 2012. And away you go.
Thank you, Scott Murphy. I appreciate it.
Go, George!
Lauren Murphy, formerly Lauren Pantos, and I am the second eldest of the four girls here in Carlsbad, California, to interview my dad about all the exciting memories that he wants to share with us. Welcome, George.
Okay, thank you. I'm so happy to be here in your beautiful home.
Great. Well, we're happy to have you. So we've compiled some questions for my dad, and we're just going to go through some of these together.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. What do you remember about your own grandparents? How did they live, and what were your parents like? How did they meet?
Lauren, I never met my grandparents. My mother and father were born in Greece, and their parents lived in Greece, and then they immigrated to this country, and so I never actually met them.
And where in Greece were your parents from?
My mother came from a small town called Delvino, that's Delvino, which is in the northern part of Greece. And my father came from a small village in the northern part of Greece called Sotira, S-O-T-I-R-A. They didn't know each other where they lived, but they eventually married.
And have you ever visited those places?
When I was in the Army in 1953, I was stationed in Germany, and I took leave and I went to that area. However, at the time, that area had become Albania instead of Greece. The border had changed. So Albania was you couldn't get in without a special visa, so I never got in there. But I did rent a boat, and I went on the outskirts, and I did see the village from the water.
Wow. So what was your relationship like with each of your parents?
Excellent. My father was a very hard-working man. He immigrated to this country when he was 9 years old, and he went into Massachusetts where he joined up with his brother, Constant, who had come a couple of years earlier. And he worked very hard. He had just a third-grade education. And initially he was in the fruit distribution business, and then he eventually got into the restaurant business. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. She raised 3 children, my brother Ernest, a younger brother, and my sister Angeline, my younger sister, and myself. There are 3 of us, and we lived in Worcester, Massachusetts.
And tell us about your first language and when you learned English.
Well, because my mother was from Greece, she didn't speak English when she came to this country. And so when I was at home as a young boy under 5, I spoke Greek with my mother. And so the first year I went to kindergarten, the teacher was talking to me and I didn't understand a word she was saying because she was speaking English. So she said to my mother, "You got to take him home and teach him English." So I lost a year, and I went back to school the following year where I had picked up a few words of English.
Right, that's great. So tell us about your brothers and sisters and what they are like and what it was like growing up with
Oh,
them.
my younger brother Ernest is a wonderful young man. He's quiet, hardworking. He's 6 years younger, and he went to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and he eventually bought an insurance agency in Worcester, which he owns and just sold recently for a lot of money. My sister Angeline followed somewhat in my footsteps in her first job. She's 4 years younger. She became a librarian in a radio station, and she became very much involved with music, records, programming, traffic on the radio station, and she's always had that. As a matter of fact, she married Gary Walsh, who at that time was a disc jockey in the radio station.
Wow,
yeah,
that's great. Excellent. And as far as school, do you have any memories that you want to share about your school teachers just growing up as a young child?
Well, I went to a school in Worcester, Massachusetts called Woodland, which was the grammar school for 6 years, and then they had a feeder prep school that I went to called Woodland Prep from 7th and 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And then from that point on went to high school. I went to South High School in Worcester, Massachusetts. And my memories at that time were primarily of a lot of the activities that my mother had gotten me into, including music. I took up clarinet, took up saxophone, became very interested in radio broadcasting, and eventually when I went to college I majored in that.
So as a child, were you mischievous or were you well behaved?
I don't think it's like it is today. I think in those days, when the children were at home, they were mostly outside playing with other kids in the neighborhood. I remember as a young kid having a sandbox in the backyard, having a rabbit in the backyard. I remember going down the street and trading comic books with my playmates. I remember playing hide and seek, kick the can. Those are the games that we played a lot of, cops and robbers. It was not like it is now. There were no electronic gadgets. We had no cell phones, no Wi-Fi's, whatever you call them. We didn't have any of that.
No iPads?
No iPads? Are you kidding? We didn't even have television.
Right.
No television. My best friend when I was growing up was the radio. I used to listen to the radio all the time. Hockey games, baseball games. And my favorite program was a program that used to come on every single day called American Bandstand. And every 15 minutes they would have a different orchestra. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, Stage 4. And my ear was always glued to that. That's why I became interested primarily in jazz music. And I became interested in the bands of the day and eventually got into radio. I became a member of the WTAG Radio Club, which was offered to young people in Worcester. I used to go down to those meetings and was trained by announcers. And it was there that I met an announcer that told me about the course offered at Syracuse University.
Great. So what about your first job and your first car? Do you have any memories on that?
Well, when I was going to college, I really needed to make extra money. So I worked odd jobs. I worked cleaning houses. I worked in an orchard picking fruit. I worked in a restaurant, serving food. Those were like odd jobs, but I was still always interested in radio. And so my very first serious job was I was hired as a radio announcer at station WOLF in Syracuse, New York, on the 11th floor of the Onondaga Hotel in beautiful downtown Syracuse, where I began my shift in my junior year of college at 6 o'clock in the evening. After having spent a day in school and studying, I'd take my car, drive downtown and worked in WOLF from 6 o'clock in the evening until 2 o'clock in the morning as a radio announcer.
And I understand you had a nickname there.
Well, in college, I had a lot of nicknames, but one of the nicknames that I had in college was Sandman, because I ran the Sandman Serenade television radio program, which went on from 10 o'clock until 2 in the morning, where people would call in with requests. So people on the campus used to listen to that program all the time. So when I'd walk down the street and then somebody say, "There goes the Sandman."
Now, what year did you graduate from college?
1952.
So after graduating from college, where did you go from there?
Well, after I graduated from college, there was a draft on, which meant that everybody had to go into the military. So I got my notice saying that I would probably be drafted in later part of 1952. But instead of waiting, I didn't want to waste a lot of time, so I just volunteered to get it over with, and I went into the military in July of 1952. I joined the Army.
And where were you stationed?
Initially, I was stationed at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston. Eventually, I was sent to Fort Dix, New Jersey for my training, 16 weeks of training. And then, luckily, I had a very good assignment. I was sent to Europe, where I spent the rest of my 2 years at Heidelberg, Germany, in the U.S. Army headquarters in Europe, which was in Heidelberg. And I had a wonderful 2 years, a year and a half in Germany.
Well, and you probably learned the language when you were there?
Well, I tried to. I mean, I worked on it. I didn't learn it like fluently, but I went to the University of Heidelberg nights to take cultural courses, and I traveled around the country a lot, and I had a lot of German friends, and I enjoyed it. It was a wonderful experience for the first time for a young boy from Worcester, Massachusetts, to be in Europe.
Mm-hmm. And then transitioning from the military into the next chapter of your career, tell us what decisions you made to kind of move out of the military and move into something different.
Well, my job in the military was an interesting job. I was in what is called intelligence, G2, which was a military form of intelligence. And because of that background, I sent a letter to the Central Intelligence Agency in Washington, and they wrote back and said that when I came back to the United States, there would be a job for me. Mm-hmm. So when I came back from the military in July of 1954, I went right into the CIA for my first job, which was as an intelligence analyst in Washington, D.C.
Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds exciting. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was just a clerical job. It wasn't terribly interesting. I had decided to go to law school at that time, so I was working there in the daytime, and then at night, at 5 o'clock, I would go to night school at George Washington Law School. So I had a combination of work and study for 3 years.
And were you keeping up at this point with your music and your interest in
Well,
playing
I
instruments?
had been playing in a band for quite a while. I was playing saxophone and clarinet in a band, and I still had all my instruments, but I had sort of lost interest in that because of school and work. I had no time left over for that, although I was playing here and there once in a while when I could get a job as a musician. But I forgot to mention that after my work at CIA, I became an insurance adjuster for an insurance company while I was going to law school. So in the daytime, I would go to work from like 9 to 5, and then from 5 to 8:30 I would be in law school, and then I'd go home and study until midnight and start the whole routine.
Wow.
And did that for 3 years in a row, summers included.
Wow, it sounds pretty
And so I finished law school.
rigorous.
I finished law school in 3 years, nights, which usually takes 4.
Wow,
But I did it in 3 because I went summers.
right.
Yeah.
So tell me about when you met your wife, Barbara, my mom, and where that played into all of this. Obviously it sounds like you were so busy. I don't know how you had time to date.
Let's see, where did I meet? Oh yes, I was after I graduated from law school. I met some young men who were also a Greek background like myself in Washington at church. One was Michael Vlahos, the other one was Andy Cartelis, and then Sam Sabat. We all met at church, and all of us were living on our own. So we decided to get a house and live together and share.
Right.
So we rented a house in Arlington, Virginia, and one day I was down at the Key Bridge Marriott Hotel, which is right there between Washington and Virginia, and I was having breakfast at the counter, and so I was reading the newspaper, having my bagel and coffee, and I noticed there was a very beautiful young lady sitting next to me. So we got to talking, and that was your mother. Yeah, we met there at the Marriott Key Bridge Hotel at the counter.
Over food, surprise, surprise.
What?